Okay, this is our last sentence for the week, at least for first year students, which most of us are. So this is week 13, sentence number 3. We are just going to slowly go through it together. Get out some paper if you are doing that, or analytical task sheet, and join along. So I'm going to read the sentence to you in case you can't see it that clearly. It says, my tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest since we studied it today. So go ahead, and if you'd like to write this down to follow along, you can pause the video, write down the sentence, and check the mechanics while you're doing that. And come on back. All right, if you have it written down, remember you can always quickly check the mechanics, make sure everything's capitalized, punctuated correctly, spelled correctly, makes complete sense, all of that stuff. And once we've done that, we move on to looking at the purpose of our sentence. So the purpose, it could be declarative, exclamatory, interrogative, or imperative. So give it a look, see if you have a guess. My tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest since we studied it today. This is just making a statement. It's punctuated with a period. It's not exclaiming it, so it is declarative. So you can mark that on your analytical task sheet that it's a declarative sentence. All right. So moving on, we're going to start looking at the structure of this sentence, okay? Before we do that, let's look to see if we have any prepositional phrases. This isn't really going to change the structure, but it's just extra words that sometimes might throw us off. So a prepositional phrase is going to start with a preposition and end with an object of a preposition, and you know your list of prepositions. So do we see any of them? My tutor showed the children pictures of is a preposition, okay? Of Mount Everest is going to be our prepositional phrase. So we're just going to throw this into parentheses just because it's sort of extra stuff in our sentence. And now let's check. Remember, our simple sentence is just one independent clause. Our compound sentence would be 2 independent clauses combined with a fanboy. So do we have any fanboys? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. I do not see one. All right, so now we have our complex sentence structure that we've started working with. So let's see if we have any relative pronouns or any subordinating conjunctions. Our relative pronouns are, examples are like our who, which clause, but they could be introduced by any of these relative pronouns. And then our subordinating conjunctions are our www.asia.wub words. When, while, where, as, since, if, although, whereas, unless, because. So let's look for any of those words and see if they're introducing to us a subordinate clause. All right, my tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest since we studied it today. All right, so since is on our list of subordinating conjunctions, okay? We're going to label it with a C for conjunction. And let's see the subordinating clause that it is introducing. Since we studied it today. We've got a subject and a verb there. However, if we were to say, since we studied it today, could that stand alone? No, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So that's what qualifies it as a subordinate clause. All right, so we're going to underline it 2 times. Since we studied it today. Okay? Alrighty, now let's look at the rest of our sentence. My tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest. Can that stand alone? There's a subject and a verb. Yeah, it can. So that makes it an independent clause, which thank goodness, because this couldn't stand alone without an independent clause. All right, so we're going to underline this 1 time to show it's an independent clause. So we now know that our complex sentence structure is going to be an independent clause and a subordinate clause, and it's going to have one of these words in it introducing that subordinate clause. So you can go ahead and mark off the complex sentence as the structure. All right, moving on, we're going to start labeling the these independent clauses. We're going to start, or not these clauses, and we're going to start with our first one. My tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest, okay? Who or what is this sentence about? Who showed the children pictures? All right. It's going to be tutor. Tutor is who this clause is about. All right, now what's being said about our subject? What's being said about tutor? Tutor showed. So showed is going to be our verb. All right, let's figure out if we can figure out what kind of verb this is. Tutor showed what? Is there a direct object receiving this action? Receiving showed. Tutor showed what? Pictures, okay? So we're gonna label pictures direct object. Tutor showed pictures. Now remember, just a quick thing, it's whatever is receiving, the direct object is whatever is receiving this action showed. So we wouldn't say, if you wanted to say children, is this sentence or is this clause really saying the tutor showed children? It's not like showing children off to something. The tutor showed pictures. Now we can ask the question, the tutor showed pictures to whom or what? To whom is the children. So that would make children the indirect object. Alrighty, so the only other words here in this clause are the and my. Let's start with my. What's my doing here? My is modifying tutor. Whose tutor? My tutor. Whose is one of our adjective questions, okay? So my is an adjective. Once we start getting into our pronouns a little bit more, you'll notice that this is a possessive pronoun adjective because possessive pronoun adjectives answer the question whose. So we'll label it adjective. And then we have the. We've done a million of these. The is an adjective. It's an article adjective. It's telling us which children, the children. All right. I'm sorry. We also have this prepositional phrase in here. So we know that a prepositional phrase is going to have a preposition. It's going to have an object of the preposition, okay? So of, we already figured out that was our preposition. So we're going to label it PR. Mount Everest is the object of the preposition. So you could just do this sort of thing. It's both. I mean, that's one thing, but all right. So let's go on to, let's first know what pattern we're using up here for this clause. We have S, V, T, forgot to add that in, I-O, D-O. So that's the pattern we have up top. All right, now let's look at our subordinate clause. We have since we studied it today. All right, who or what is this clause about? Who studied it today? We, right? So we is going to be the subject. We is a noun or a pronoun. It's a pronoun that we're using. All right. What is being said about we? We studied. So we're going to put a V there. Now, let's see. Is anyone or anything receiving the action studied? We studied what? We studied it. So it is a D-O. All right. Now remember, if you're looking, since we've been doing so many S-V-T-I-O-D-O, if you were looking for maybe there's an I-O here, remember an indirect object can only come between a VT and a DO. It can't come after it, okay? Not that this looks like that, but just in case you're an autopilot. Now, if we had a DO, if there was action being transferred, don't forget that we need to label this verb transitive. All right, now we already labeled since, our conjunction up here. We have today. What is today doing in this clause? It's answering a question for us, right? Since we studied it when. Do you remember what, which of our modifiers uses the question when? Since we studied it today, it's going to be modifying what word? Does it seem to be modifying we or studied? Or it, I guess. It's telling us more about studied. Or it's telling us about study. It's not telling us about anything else. So when did we study it? Today. Studied is a verb. That makes today an adverb, okay? So we're going to label that AV. Alrighty then. I believe we have everything labeled. So let's jot down our diagram and our pattern. So we're going to start with our top one, our independent clause. My tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest, okay? So this is an SVT IODO, SVT IODO. So our subject is tutor. Our VT is showed. Our indirect object is children. And our direct object is pictures. Did I spell that right? Okay. That is the pattern, but we have some more things to add to it. So we have my is modifying tutor. So we're going to do our slanted line here. And don't forget to capitalize my, because whatever is capitalized in our sentence is capitalized down here. And then we have the is modifying children. The. And then we have our prepositional phrase of Mount Everest. What is that telling us more about? It's telling us more about the pictures. No, we've done one of these. It might have been a little bit since we've done it. A prepositional phrase is diagrammed by doing a slanted line that the preposition sits on, and then the object of the preposition goes on another horizontal line. So we're going to put of on the slanted line and Mount Everest on that horizontal line. That's where the object of the preposition goes. Okay, now our subordinate clause is going to go on its own pattern shape down below. Since we studied it today, this is an SVT DO shape that we're going to draw out first. So got our horizontal line. We have SVT DO. We'll go here. So our subject is we. Our VT studied. And our DO is it. Now we have today. We said that today is modifying studied. So that's going to go underneath studied. And the last thing that we have is since. Now, remember we talked about if a subordinate clause was introduced by either a relative pronoun, it would be adjectival. If it was introduced with a WWW word, it would be adverbial. Since is one of our WWW words. So it is an adverbial subordinate clause. Adverbs modify what? Adverbs modify verbs. So the way we're going to connect these two clauses is by connecting our two verbs, showed and studied. And if you look at it real quickly, it makes sense why we're connecting those two, okay? My tutor showed the children pictures of Mount Everest. Since we studied it today, we're asking, why did she show the pictures? That's what this subordinate clause is telling us more about. Why did she show you pictures of Mount Everest? Well, because we studied it today. It makes sense. So we connect these two verbs, and we will put, what was the word? Since on that dotted line connecting them. And that's it. Hope it was helpful.